we are the sum of all of our experiences. That's our nurture, the way we were brought up, educated. And we are also the sum of all of our ancestors. We're wired a certain way. So your nurture and your nature creates these filters that you see life through.
Right.
So we're a big advocate of, you need to respect other people's model of the world. It is just different.
Exactly. Yeah.
But so we can start celebrating people's differences versus tolerating.
Hello, I'm John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people that are watching us from around the world, saying, okay, I know where British Columbia is, where is Prince George? Well, we all know Vancouver, beautiful city. We are about 500 miles north of Vancouver, or for our friends in Europe, about 800 kilometers. That puts us physically in the center of British Columbia, east to west, north to south. Big, big province. Beautiful province, lots of forests, lots of beautiful mountains, everything. So today's podcast, very interesting person. His name is J.J. Brun, and he is an amazing individual. He is a retired spy, and that's going to be a very interesting discussion. And he's also an author. And JJ, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here, John.
So just to give us an idea, where are you located right now physically?
I'm located in Gatineau, Quebec. So that would be 10 kilometers from downtown Ottawa. So
Okay.
quite often I would just refer to people that I'm from Ottawa.
Yeah.
Because
And
Gatineau is like,
so
what?
you're a Canadian, like I am a Canadian. So today we are in Canada. And so tell us a little bit more about your background. So you were born in Quebec? And
No, I was actually born, John, in Field, Ontario.
okay.
So from Ottawa, if you go north, about 5 hours, North Bay, in between North Bay and Sudbury, Ontario, there's a little village called Field, Ontario. It's a French community. So I was born and raised in Field, Ontario. Very much a small village. Lumber was the main industry back there. I come
Yeah.
from an entrepreneurial family background. My dad owned a gas station, had a sawmill, and also had a chip harvester company,
Wow.
as in we would make wood chip. So hiring a lumberjack. So basically grew up in an entrepreneurial, francophone, small village. And then from
Yes.
there, high school would be in the bigger town or village, Sturgeon Falls, Ontario, where we actually, yeah, it's very much a French community up there. Like my full name is Jean-Jacques Joseph Brun. I got all the J's.
Right.
And when I was working overseas, they couldn't pronounce my name. They couldn't pronounce
No.
Jean, and but they could say John Jack. Hey, John Jack. And then there's a British colleague when I was working overseas. We were alone in the office, and he needed something on my desk, and he said, "Hey, JJ." I turned around, and yeah, and then I provided him with the stapler that he was looking for, and I got branded JJ. So it became a working name when I was overseas, and people like it because it's just short and sweet. But it's it turned into, when you pronounce your name in French, that's fine, but when you have to pronounce it in English, it's a little bit different. So JJ became a working name to help people connect, just to make it a
Yeah.
little bit easier.
And not uncommon, right? So to use
Mhm.
for yeah, well, any name actually. Sometimes you call me JB, and so it's one of those things. So the interesting part about Ontario and Quebec is
Mhm.
that we have two official languages in Canada. The one is English, the other one is French. Now,
Correct.
it's not limited to, as you already indicated, to Quebec, but also going into the northern part, in particular of Ontario, some of the communities are interacting more on the Quebec side or are French because of the mixture of the population. And then
Yeah.
there is also French spoken on Atlantic Canada, and
Oh, yeah.
and and one of the provinces in particular. Maybe you can just explain that to us a little bit.
So Quebec being the largest francophone community in Canada, the second would be the northern part of Ontario.
Yeah,
It's very common that the higher you go up north in Ontario, the more you're going to speak French. Like our village, 95% francophones, 5%, actually 2% English, and 3 Polish.
oh,
As in, there was
amazing.
just a lot of the farmers, so they just found a safe place. In the Maritimes, it's a different type of dialect. And Nouveau Brunswick, Nova Scotia. Um, uh, there's a place named called Shediac, Nouveau Brunswick. And my boss, when I was working over in Bagueville, Quebec, so if you know where Quebec City is, 2 hours
Yeah, yeah,
north of Quebec City is
right.
Bagueville. So it was an Air Force base, and I was working with the operating an intelligence cell within the fighter squadron, the 433 fighter squadron. But my captain, my boss, was from Shediac, New Brunswick, and he spoke a different French dialect. So in the section, we were 4 intelligence operators, and we had all 4 different French background. One was from Newfoundland, one was from Shediac, New Brunswick, one from Quebec City, and one from Northern Ontario. So it made it for a very colorful language or exchange.
So what I
Um,
find interesting about it, JJ, we have a number of things in common. You know that I'm a lumberman. I've been in the lumber industry for, I'm 80, going on 84 this year. So I've been in the lumber industry, started in the lumber industry in Holland when I was 13. So
mm,
I've been working in the lumber industry for more than 70 years. And then here in Canada, I have a lumber mill here in Prince George and another one in
okay.
Vanderhoof, another one in Houston. So lumber is very much part of my life and always has been. The other part that you may find interesting is that I was born in Holland, northeastern part of Holland. And, and we speak a dialect there that in my province that's called Groningen. There are 11 provinces in the small country of Holland, and I'm sure you're familiar with it because you've gone through there, likely. And and we speak a dialect there that if I would speak dialect in Holland, in say
Yes.
Amsterdam or Utrecht or whatever the cities is, they wouldn't understand me. So I would have to speak High Dutch, and then a lot of times they refer to my dialect as, oh, those are farmers. And so even when I'm in the high part of Holland and I try to speak High Dutch, they can hear right away us saying, oh, he's a farmer from Groningen. So the other part that we have in common, likely because you made a reference to it, I was drafted into the Air Force when I was 18, and I spent 30 months in the Air Force being security, in particular in Special Forces. And
Okay.
so, yeah, so we have some things in common in a number of areas. So let's go a little bit further then, coming back to your background, and then from there on in, you want to. So, did you go into the military, or you got your schooling in Northern Ontario, and then where did you go from there?
Well, I was studying at the in Sudbury, Ontario, at the Laurentian University,
Right.
and I never had a plan to join the military. High school is a 5 year program for us. It was and high school wasn't easy for me in regards to I had to work a little bit harder to memorize or to understand what they're trying to teach us. Sport really helped me to go through. That I had something to look forward to. So
Well, just
football.
coming back to high school, was it because of in Sudbury they are teaching in English and your mother tongue would be French, or was it another reason that
Well,
were
Sudbury
challenged?
it's a bilingual university, so you
Right,
can take your program you can have some classes in French. You
right,
could have it in English. But for us
right,
in Ontario, it's easy to study in English than it is to study in French. French
right.
is a very complex detail. It's hard all to write to properly write in French. When I'm in Ottawa, I speak a certain French. But if I'm teaching and training in Montreal, well, I'm going to adapt to that type of French because it's a little bit cleaner, a little bit crisp. If I'm going to Paris, well, it's a Parisian French, so there's going to be an accent that's going to be added so that I can fit in or that I can, and I have an ability of being able to adapt.
You
When
blend no matter where it is,
well,
right?
yes, my spouse, my wife, my business partner, she would not.
Right,
She's going to talk, communicate. She's not going to make that effort because in Paris, her experience, we understand what is being said. You may sense whether we have an accent, but you don't have to minimize us
right,
to edify yourself. Like she always felt being minimized. And I'm
right,
like, well, no, you just want to adapt. There's different French dialects in Paris, and
right,
you just do your best to communicate based on how they are wired or want to hear us communicate. At least do an effort. In the
right.
UK, because I have a lot of training in the UK, there's five different dialects in the UK, depending upon which part of the country you come from. And again,
Exactly.
it's adapting yourself, and you sort of like I get, just in time, I'll get the lingo, I'll get the little uh, their acronyms that they're going to be using. Back home, we we are French, but we are tolerated in the province of Ontario. We're not celebrated; we're
No.
tolerated. In
Yeah.
English, you're going to learn English
Right.
because the channels are English. It's easier to communicate in English than it is in French. When we were in our high school, the professor obligated us to speak in French. So in the
Right.
corridors, we're speaking French, but outside, we're just mixing it all up.
Right.
So for me, the only thing that attracted me after high school was phys ed, physical education, as in I
Sport.
say it's the only thing that if I was going to go, then I need to take something that I would be passionate about.
Exactly.
What happened when I was there, when I would come back home, and I had a fight with dad. Now, dad was paying for everything. As a sole entrepreneur, when the sawmill goes on strike, he still has a payroll. My father would say to me, "Son, you've never been in business until you had a payroll."
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
understand that today. I didn't
Yeah.
back then. I was 19,
Yeah.
and I had a budget. But it really stretched the budget.
Yeah.
And at one point, I came in and I had a sweatshirt, an embroidered Laurentian University sweatshirt, big,
Right.
thick, and those are expensive. And
Yeah.
Dad looked at me. He said, "Where did you get this?" I said, "Well, I bought it at the university." "Who paid for that?" Now I knew where we were going with this. As soon as he said that, I knew where we were going. So I paid for that. "Where did you get your money?" "I worked this summer." "Where did you work this summer?" "At the gas station." "Who owns the gas station?" "You do." "So who paid for that?"
Yeah.
2 weeks after
Understood.
that, I was in Saint Jean Richelieu, Quebec, in boot camp. I just basically just for me, the military was an exit strategy.
Right.
It wasn't a strategic plan in my life. It's more of
Right.
it was an exit strategy. It didn't make a lot of sense because I was tired to be told what to do.
Right.
Oh, and you joined the military? I just needed to exit. I just needed to. I knew that
Yeah.
I was going to be fed. I was going to be dressed, well, all in green. and I was going to. They pay you. You have a small salary,
Right.
and there's no guarantee that you're going to pass.
No.
But at least that to me was like, okay, I'll be safe. I'll go. But John, 3 days after being screamed at, and I had more hair back then.
Yeah.
I'm like, these people are crazy. Being
Yeah.
yelled at all the time, and I called home. I was talking to my mother, and I said, I'll make peace with Dad. I'm not going to lose my first year university. I'll get a tutor, a mentor, and I'll make my case with the university. But my dad was listening on the other line,
Okay.
and he said, "You've made your bed, son." And then he hung up the phone. All right, that bridge no longer existed.
Yeah.
Now I had to
He was
pass.
strict.
But John, it was the best thing ever
Yeah.
because you're
Looking back, huh?
19.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Now, yes, because you're 19, you've made your choice.
Yeah.
Now you have to live with it.
Yeah.
And we were about 40 students back then. And the chief instructor would say to us, look to your left, look to your right. One of you is not going to be here at the end. They only needed 20 to graduate
Right.
to send them to Valcartier. So for me, it was like, okay, now I was just out of control in regard to my temperament style, my personality, my character. I wanted to be the boss. I didn't understand myself like I did. I struggled in high school of what do you want to do in life? What do you want to be in life? What do you want to and being kept everyone always asking that questions, whether it's your friends, your colleagues, your family members. It's just I don't know what I want to do because I don't know myself. I don't know my strengths. I don't know my weaknesses. I don't know. Like it sure would have been nice to know back then so that you could make a vocational direction or decision as to where you want to go. I
Right.
should have been in the business of sport,
Right.
not the phys ed program. The phys ed program, you're going to become a teacher,
Right.
but the business of sport, now that has my entrepreneurial DNA inside of me.
Right.
That would have had a little bit more stickiness to it.
Right.
But fast forward, when I graduated boot camp, Dad was there, Mom was there. They're very proud. Uh, Good relationship. It's just that we had a fight, and I left, and I started my military career. I did 5 years within the combat arms, the Royal 22nd
So
Regiment.
you were one of the 40, or you were part of the 20 that survived?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
They had a way of filtering people.
Yeah.
Um, if you were the only child of your family, you had it bad because
Yeah.
they would be harder on you. Well, we were two brothers, as in, so I had no prior military experience. Didn't do the cadets. Didn't do the reserves. Never shot a weapon in my life. It was just they told me to do something, and I would do it to the best of my capabilities.
So what I remember of it, JJ, is I was drafted. There is no more draft in Holland now. There was then. And so that was at the time that I was 18. And so you are then drafted into the, in my case, Air Force. And you go to boot camp. And the boot camp was about 4 or 5 months because it was for special forces. I have no idea why they put me in there, but they did. And so now, as you well know, that is tough going, the initial beginning. So we were 40 in a room, 2 levels high, the beds, and with 39 other guys that, and just at the age that you think you know it all, and the other 39 think they know it all as well. So it's a bit humbling. And then the morning at 5:30, you better be outside, and you line up, and then they take everything out of you for the next 3 or 4 months, and then we'll see if you survive it. So it was quite an experience. Not at the time that I appreciated it very much, but I do later, still looking back to it. I even at 80, nearly 84 now, I'm still looking back, and I still have habits that I developed then that are still part of my life, as they are to you, I'm sure.
It's very hard to get rid of all the green.
Exactly.
Um, yeah, because in Canada you do the boot camp is 10 weeks, and then
Yeah.
from there you go to infantry school,
Yeah.
combat arms. Now that's 3 months.
Yeah.
So this is where you're going to learn your trade. Now, perfect. Then you go to the battalion, and off you go. And
Yeah.
when I joined the French regiment. So it's the Le Royal 22e Régiment. So if you go to Quebec City and you go to the Citadel, you'll see the Red Guard, right?
Right.
Dressed with the bison, the busby,
Yeah.
bison hats, and you're the honor guard. So
Right.
I did that one summer. But I had my first operational tour when I was with the infantry. So
Right.
Cyprus was peacekeeping
Yeah.
back then, and the fact that I was bilingual, I could operate in the headquarters to manage the radio, so I can communicate with the Greeks and the Turks, and
Yeah.
translate English to French for our commanding officers that didn't speak English back then. But it
Right.
takes in back then it took 8 years to be a sergeant in the infantry. If you just do
Right.
your job, 4 years to be a corporal, 2 years to be a master corporal, 2 years after that, you should be. The plan is that you should be at that state where you're going to get your sergeants. I did it in 3 years and 10 months.
It's very good.
A blessing and a curse at the same
Right.
time,
Right.
because the old guard doesn't like you at all,
No.
because they want you to do your time. But I was a
Yeah.
different breed. I was bigger, stronger, bilingual, computer literate. I was a new generation of
Made them
soldiery.
uncomfortable, right?
And
Yeah.
yeah, oh yes. So at the end, and I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to look at for something else, like an exit strategy. But I didn't have any bad experience with the Royal 22nd Regiment, so I changed trades. I went into the intelligence branch,
Right.
and I did 15 years within the intelligence branch. And it's just to prolong my career, because my mindset back then is doing 20 years in the military. Then I'll be about 40. Then I can diversify.
Yeah.
But there was
Get a
no
pension.
plan of being like a lifelong journey
Right.
to be always in the military, because the entrepreneurial side of me, I wanted to, have a little bit more control.
Right.
So 20 years in the military, 5 of the combat arms, but 15 within the intelligence branch. And in the intelligence branch, the last 10 years, I specialized in human intelligence.
Right.
So my claim to fame when I was within the intelligence branch is I was the first one selected for the role of a contact handler
Right.
during the war in Bosnia. So a contact handler is a person where he or she is sent into a hostile environment. So it was the war zone in Bosnia,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
he or she has to cultivate sources, build relationships, determine their intentions, and modify their behaviors, without the use of any Jedi mind tricks, but just basically get them to buy into
Yeah.
being an informant, letting us know what's going on. And
Right.
um, yeah, and it was quite interesting.
Now, what
Um,
years were that, JJ? Because I remember
uh,
it well,
90, 95,
Yeah.
the war,
Yeah. The
95,
Bosnia
96.
Herzegovina. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I lived in a local community. So we weren't, John, we wouldn't do this today. We
No.
were in uniform. So I was working in Mostar. Mostar was where we played, but I lived in Medjugorje. Medjugorje is a religious site where the um, Virgin Mary appeared to three girls on top of a mountain. It
Okay.
becomes a yearly pilgrimage. So all the bad guys live in Medjugorje because it's quite safe. And then they would play downtown Mostar. So we'd be chasing them. And then at night, you'd see them in the coffee shops. So it became surreal. And what was fascinating is that we were living in a villa, uh, our safe house, which wasn't really safe. The first 3 months was underneath the British led mission. So we're driving Land Rovers, and it's British leadership. So we're working 7 days a week. There's no weekend. You're not there as a tourist.
No.
And then halfway, because this was implementation force. This was I-4 underneath the British. And then the Americans came in, and it was S-4, stabilizing force.
Right.
So we changed all the vehicles. We now have American vehicles. So for North American, that wasn't a problem, but for Europeans, that was a problem because of the power steering, and they would
Yeah.
often roll the vehicles.
They were not used to it.
Exactly. Now, but the Americans, they put Sunday as a day of rest, and I'm like, oh, day of rest. It's like that just prolongs your tour. You want to stay occupied. So we weren't allowed to aggressively do the work, but we were still supposed to do the work. But all the people that I was running or cultivating, bad guys, they would always do something on Sunday.
Yeah.
Right. And then it's like you would hear, because we were in the mountains, you would hear explosions.
Yeah.
And it was ethnic cleansing. They were destroying the new houses that they just built because they didn't want any of the certain ethnicity to come and live in their village. They wanted 100% Croats in that village. So any other nationalities that NATO was giving them a new house, they were blowing it up.
That whole war that lasted for, how long was it? 5, 6, 7, 8 years between Bosnia, and was all about the different nationalities from the same region against others in the region, right?
Yeah, they live. The Europeans, they remember history a lot. They live a lot with history, and
The past, yeah.
we had 400 years of occupation with the Turkish, with the Tito, and then we had this and we had that. And it takes about 4 generations to change that culture.
Yeah.
Not to have that revengeful side, and it doesn't take much for things to flare up. Not every country can live with a democratic type of system. It'd be nice, but it's like there's places that you just have to be I'm not saying that everyone not that you should be a dictator. Certain places you have to have a strong, firm grasp, and you
Yeah.
have to make peace. So the first tour was peacekeeping. The second tour, not peacemaking. That I liked. I'm like, we are going to have peace. We're going to mandate this. You sign a
Yeah.
Dayton agreement, so you can impose it as in this is where we're going. So
Yeah.
but it was very interesting because I had to go to spy school in the UK to be trained as a contact handler.
Right.
Then deployed. It took me about 4 days to get to the safe house. Once I deployed from London to Zagreb, Zagreb to Sarajevo, Sarajevo. We zigzagged through the country and then get to the safe house. And there you had anywhere from 5 to 7 different nationalities. And in Canada, we'll speak French and English, maybe, at least 2. It's very common for people to have 2 languages.
Yeah.
Americans, 1, and if they speak 2 languages, well, yeah, because of Mexico, so Spanish. But the
Right.
Europeans, 3, 5, that's quite common for them to speak 5 languages.
Very common, yeah.
And English is one of the last one that they learn.
Exactly.
So
It's
the fact that
usually
we
German,
do
French, Spanish.
German is very popular.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then,
my last partner in Bosnia was a German. I still remember his name, Reinhold Spohl.
Yeah.
He wanted to be called by his full name, Reinhold Spohl.
Yeah.
So we get a nickname when you're sort of like when you're in the group, when you get branded, you get a nickname. So I became JJ. We had someone from Madrid. So he became Taco Bell, run for the border. So we just get nicknames. So Reinhold Sproul, Sparky, and then he would say Vi. my name is Reinhold Sproul.
Yeah.
Okay, how about reindeer? Hey, reindeer. Rein, Vi. My name is, and then at the
Yeah.
end is like, his nickname was Reinhold Sproul.
Now,
It's
this
just,
was all under NATO, right? At the time that had were peacekeeping. Were you in uniform then most of the times when you were in operation then? Under
yes, we
the
had to.
yeah,
Because the Dayton Agreement, for us, for Canadians, we had to be in uniform. The weapon has to be seen. You could not have a concealed weapon.
right.
So um, that was not advanced operations. Now, since that time, things have changed because Bosnia. I think we stayed there for about 20 years, and then when there was a change in government, they kind of like to change things around and have their own place where they put their flag. So they closed the door, as in, okay, we're like same Cyprus. That's exactly what happened in Cyprus. As in, we were there for so many years,
Yeah.
and there's no will for it to change.
No.
So we pulled out. The conservative government, I think, made that decision. Enough is enough. As in, and then Bosnia came into where we're going to be playing. Perfect. We were the first group to go into Sarajevo and under the UN banner, and then from there it turned into I4 and S4. Change of
So
government,
yeah,
Afghanistan came into the picture
yeah.
once we pulled out of Bosnia.
So now you are in Bosnia, is close to the Mediterranean, to Italy and those areas. It's in the uh, Eastern Mediterranean region, correct? And then Cyprus is interesting because it is jointly owned. Half of Cyprus is Greece, the other half is,
Turkish, yeah.
say again,
Turks,
Turks.
Turks.
Yeah,
Yeah. So
and
the
that
the northern part of the island is Turkish
yeah,
occupied, and then in the south is the money's on the south side.
yeah.
But there's no interest because Cyprus is a very strategic um, location island for the Allies. And look what's happening right now, as in they're grouping in Cyprus to bring the food to Lebanon. So it's a
Right.
very strategic. There's no interest for it to be all Greek, all Turk, or and it runs the economy. The UN is in there for peacekeeping, and it just generates a lot of revenue um, for the island. There's no, from my experience there, and looking into when we left, there's no um, will for the UN to bring a closure to this. It's working right now the way it is. They're able to maintain it.
They have been
Um,
able to settle their differences, though, and they are benefiting from each other. So it has kind of settled down, and they play a fairly significant role in
yeah,
the troubled areas that are in the Middle East already. The other
yeah,
thing that, and you were in those areas, and I remember from the time that I was still in Holland in the mid 60s, we brought a lot of guest workers over from depressed countries, including Turkey, Greece, a number of other Portugal, Spain, into Holland. We call them guest workers, but they became workers that never literally left, still
mm,
are there and have now become part of the Dutch makeup. But if you look now at Greece, that was depressed, it's one of the most advanced countries in Europe, really, is doing very, very well. Now, how Bosnia and that region, relatively speaking, have settled down and are relatively peaceful at this point, right?
yes. It doesn't take much for things to flare, and when it does, it's certain areas. I've seen picture of downtown Mostar, what it looks like today compared
Yeah,
to during the war. So you can see how the economy and You have a Muslim side, and then you have a Croat side, and they seem to be working together. During the war, the Muslims and the Croat combined the forces to move the Serbs out of Mostar.
Exactly.
And then the Croats turn on the Muslim.
Right.
So there's still some tension. There's still history, so it's delicate. But it seems to be working for them. Mostar is, if you drive from Mostar to the coast to Dubrovnik, you're looking at a 45-minute to an hour drive. So it's very close. The Neretva River is what separates that region. So one side's a little more on the Muslim side, one side's more on the Croat side.
Right.
Um, but it seems that if it flares up, it tends to be the isolated areas like in Kosovo from time to time. But you're not seeing a big occupation force moving in and rockets flying all the time. You're not
No.
seeing that. You may have the odd gang or the odd group that takes weapons, pow, but not to a point where what we're seeing in Israel and in Gaza.
In Middle East, yeah. So the other part is, though, I don't know if you were involved in that area, Afghanistan, with the Taliban there and all the things
Mhm.
around that were really troubling and still are to a certain extent, but we are not exposed to them as much as we were during the period because of all the things that are happening in the Ukraine and Russia, and then also looking at the other troubling areas, the Middle East, that are now part of our attention, in particular, the Middle East, which again very complex to a lot of people watching it, but I find a lot of times, respectfully, is that underlying all of those things a lot of times are religions.
Yes.
In the Middle East in particular, you have
Mhm.
Sunnis and Shiites, and they are all Muslims, but they disagreed at the nephew 400 years ago that became a senior guy, and ever since that time they've been trying to kill each other. So something that's very difficult for me to understand. And then looking at the Middle East without going into the details is that Iran, mainly Shiites, and
Mm.
then the Syria, one third likely, and then Lebanon, something similar, one third, and then obviously we got Israel, and then so. But what I see underlying it all, and obviously I was born during war, and I understand it. And I say always, war is not good for anybody because there's some people, and again, respectfully, I was born in 1940, so I still remember the people that were shot dead, and I still remember we being liberated by the Canadians April the 12th, 1945, and I always knew from the time that I was 5 years old I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. I wanted to go when I was 17, and I was then, my parents wouldn't let me, and then I was drafted obviously when I was 18, and
Okay.
then I finally were able to leave for Canada when I was 23. It was always my dream. That's what I wanted to do. The other thing that I wanted to do is to build my own sawmill, lumber mill, because my grandfather was a master carpenter. My dad managed a small lumber
Oh.
mill, and then the other part that I did, JJ, is that I was not overly successful academically. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. So they said, what are we going to do with this guy? Do we send him to a mentally challenged school? Now, my parents were very beautiful people. So they said, no, we'll get him a trade. So they sent me to a furniture factory, and I became, at 13, a furniture maker. And, that served me well. But kids are hard on each other, right? So all my
Yes.
friends that went to the college and university, became all very successful, and I became a laborer. I'm proud of that today, but then I was kind of looked down at. And I kind of felt that I could do it just as well as all the other people, but because of leaving school, I couldn't speak English. I didn't speak, and I speak mainly dialect. And so first I had to acquire to speak High Dutch, and I barely got that under control. Then I went to Canada to learn to speak English, So it worked well, obviously, but. So then the other part that I wanted to do is I wanted to start with nothing coming to Canada. And I took my suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and $150 with me, and landed in Montreal and in the airport, and then took the train across Canada, 5 days, 4 hours, 4 days, 5 nights, and then went to the immigration office in Vancouver, and there was a German fella, so I could speak some German. Told him what I wanted to do. I want to build a lumber mill. He said, Prince George, go to Prince George. That's where they're building all the mills and pulp mills, and that's where the opportunities were. So I stopped, and I can still look here. I see the Greyhound station about 2 or 3 blocks from here. And I stepped off the bus. I had a suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and I counted my money 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. But what I did have abundance of attitude. I always, through all the ups and downs, I've been always very optimistic about things. If it is a tough day today, I know tomorrow is going to be better. And then passion. I give everything that I got. I give it 150%. And the other one is work ethic. I work harder than anybody. Even now, at approaching 84, I still get up at 5:30 in the morning, and I always make my bed. Military. I still do that now. and so and then I go to work and I give it all that I got, and I've been very, very busy, and I'm very active. I'm not here to brag about companies, but I have about 10 different companies. And then the other part that I do is I'm also an author. I know you are as well, so we want to talk about that for a minute. So I did about 3 or 4 books that I have done, and and then the companies, and then podcasting, and everybody says to me, how do you do all this stuff? Now, the other thing that I have not mentioned to you, but you may have seen in my bio, I'm also ADHD, and it took me till I was 57 when I walked into a store and I opened up a book, and the book's title was Driven to Distraction. I don't know why I picked it up, no idea. Written by Dr. Halliwell. I opened the book and it talked about ADHD, and I thought, oh my God, that's me. So I wrote in the book, now in Dutch, because I was ashamed of it, and it was stigma, not anymore, obviously. And so I wrote in the book, now I finally know who I am, in Dutch. And then the more I found out about it, looking at Google and all the other kind of things, the more I understood of it, the more it became part of things that I thought interesting. And it sounded like about 8% of the population are benefiting from or affected by ADHD. And so the more I heard about it, I thought, and the more I talked about it publicly, the more I find out, no, it's a lot more than that. And I thought it's probably as much as 20%. And so... And then, I thought I have to write a book about it. So that's what I did, ADHD Unlocked. And there are many other books as well. Now, the book that I found, Driven to Distraction, was written by Dr. Halliwell. He did about 18 books, and about 5 of them on the distraction side of things. I had him on my podcast, and you are number 227. His is 2003, and an extremely interesting podcast. So, and him and me talked about it, and his whole life internationally is about talking about issues around ADD or ADHD. And I said to him, I believe that probably 20% of the population, in my opinion, have ADHD? He said, no, John, at least 25%. I agree with them. The other part that I said to him, in my experience from that, what I have seen, is that likely of the successful entrepreneurs and CEOs, and the operative point is successful, is that at least in my mind, I said to Dr. Halliwell, at least 50% of them are ADHD. He said, no, John, at least 75%. And I agree with that. No, so anyway, that was to me a bit of a change in my life. But so doing all the things that I do is simply because of the ADHD. Now the other part that I'm working also on a book. I've been very much into health and fitness. I'm writing a book about this one here, Living Young, Dying Old. It's a picture of me. I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America.
Oh, congratulations.
Well, thank you. And I'm training right now to go to the Arnold's. I qualified for it in 2018 for the Nationals and
Wow.
for the Arnold's, yeah. And then COVID came, obviously. Now again, I'm in training, and I hope to be back
Man,
at the Arnold's in 2025 when I'm 85.
wow.
So that's kind of
That's
what I do.
fantastic. My dad was also born in 1940, so he would have
But
been
but month,
84.
but,
March. No, sorry,
Mar-
that's me. January.
January.
January,
Yeah,
the 8th of January, 1940. My mom was born on the 1st of April, 1942. So she's still
yeah,
with us.
yeah,
So normally on her birthday, I'm always going to be at the house for
yeah,
her.
yeah.
Let me loop back because you had asked a question in regards to Afghanistan.
Right.
So my time, as in being the first Canadian sent over for the role of a contact handler, I got recommended for advanced operations. You never know if you're successful. It's only at the end of your tour when you get your write up. As in the My biggest concern is I was going to be the first one voted off the island, almost like that Survivor series. You never want to be the first one voted off.
No,
But I was the
no.
first Canadian, so I want to make sure. Like I just did I put in the 16 hours and 18-hour days. I wasn't there to be a tourist, so I just outworked everybody. I wasn't the best, but I just outworked. You'll relate to this, John. There's three types of people in the military, right? We know there's
Yeah,
three. There's the people on the parade.
yeah,
There are people that is watching the parade,
yeah,
and there's the people that didn't know there was a parade. What? There's a parade? Well, they're the
yeah,
acluistic, one without a clue.
yeah.
So,
Exactly.
yeah. Now, in school, you have the A student, you got the B student, you got the C student, and the C or the D student. Now, this is what's funny. The A student all work for the D or the C students because the C and the D, they start a business and then they hire the expertise.
Exactly.
And all the B student, they work for government.
I like it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
very
it's
much
just
so.
a lot. Yeah. So for me, after Bosnia got recommended, I got sent back to the UK to go train and teach at the school in the UK.
Okay. Okay.
Then I got deployed to different parts because I was stationed in Kingston, Ontario at that time, and then I got moved to National Defense Headquarters to be the strategic debriefing officer for the Director General of Intelligence. J2X is where I resided when I went there. And in my era, because I wrote a paper on what we need to do to select people to go, and the paper got a lot of good recognition. Bravo Zulus, as in, hey, good job on this.
Yeah, yeah.
Then I got involved in um, hosting the first two contact handling course in Canada. And then from there, my role was more into staff officer role. So I did the blue collar and now I'm in the more of the white collar perspective. And my role was to select people and equip people, train them to go to Afghanistan. So I never deployed because my timeline was like, I've done this. we prep this. I mean, the selection process. Now we're training people, and we need additional training because it's not going to be the same type of work in Afghanistan than in Bosnia. In Bosnia, you could get away with a 2-man team, sometimes a 4-man team. Afghanistan, you almost need a convoy. It's like it was very labor intensive. We've never lost contact handler in Afghanistan. We're just very very good at what we do. So that was my timeline.
Right.
So that was my timeline in regards to your question for Afghanistan. I was more into preparing or prepping the new
Sure.
generation
Sure.
with this. And now Canada has a school. They're almost a division size capability. Before we only had a section. Then it turned into a company, and now the company is more of a more robust, and they do a lot of work also with the special forces that we have in Canada, and our special forces are very, very good. So
Right.
for me, when I decided it was time for me to exit after 20 years, I now do more work because I'm in year 25. So I set up a DHC training solution, and the DHC stands for Decoding Human Capital.
Okay.
I was just looking at everybody as having human capital. We have something in common. We have two things in common. Anybody that you're going to meet across the world, two things in common. We are the sum of all of our experiences. That's our nurture, the way we were brought up, educated. And we are also the sum of all of our ancestors. We're wired a certain way. So your nurture and your nature creates these filters that you see life through.
Right.
So we have we're a big advocate of, you need to respect other people's model of the world. It is just different.
Exactly. Yeah.
But so we can start celebrating people's differences versus tolerating. And then when we go start
Exactly.
tolerating, it goes into, and it can escalate very negatively
Yeah.
within. Now I do more work for the Canadian government outside, out of uniform, than when I was in uniform.
Yeah.
Because
That
I can
doesn't surprise
control,
me, JJ.
what's that?
That does not surprise me, JJ, because of your experience again. And as you just pointed out, you have the underlying experience in all those elements. Makes you more effective in terms of giving advice now. You're not restrained by all the
Oh, no.
bureaucracy and the military sometimes, you know.
You share the book, right? How a book changed or set you on the path, on the journey. Before I went over to Bosnia, I was studying temperament styles, personalities. So it was a book called Personality Plus from Florence Whittaker, and she had terminologies, as in she would put people into four quadrants, and you're a choleric, you're a sanguine, you're a phlegmatic, or melancholy. There's, medical terms, really. And it was hard to remember the names, but I liked the description of what they were saying, and I could see that I fitted into a certain quadrant or quadrants. Fast forward, I met Dr. Robert Rome from a book. The book was called Positive Personality Profile. And I'm like, positive personality profile? Oh, that's so wishy washy,
Right.
mushmallowy, kumbaya. And I looked in the back of the book, and it had a website. All right, well, it's human behavior. I'm in, that's so I'm at work and I'm Googling this. Well, actually, I'm just writing the name, and I see their website, and they have a certification program. You can be certified as a human behavior specialist. And I'm
Oh,
like,
well,
well, wait a minute, but I'm in human behavior. I'm in human intelligence.
exactly.
Doesn't it make sense that I should be trained in this? So I went down to Atlanta, Georgia, September of 1999, a defining moment in my life where I was exposed to the Four Temperament, or the DISC model of human behavior. And I became a
25
student
years
ever.
ago.
Yeah. And then
Wow.
from there, I became their training director. I now have over 30,000 hours studying, equipping, certifying people in that psychometric assessment. I train trainers in this. I train the RCMP, Royal Canadian Mounted Police. That would be the FBI for our American friends. CSIS will use this, so that would be the CIA. Revenue Canada. I help them in interviewing, debriefing, and elicitation techniques. How do you read, gain information. You cannot not communicate. So here are the clues and cues. When people
Exactly.
embellish, they tend to release information. Oh, you want to build a corporation? I'm working with a client right now, and they're having some challenges. I said, well, have you ever done a role assessment? What do you mean? Well, you have a person that you want to hire. What are the responsibility dynamics of that role? So we have
Exactly.
a whole series, and then okay, now we have to train that person responsibility dynamics. So it becomes a behavioral based onboarding program. It's how to recruit, train, and retain your personnel for long term. So make sure that they're on the right spot, in the right, on the right bus, in the right seat on the bus, so that you don't have any turnover. So I'm having a lot of fun because everything that I struggled in when I was in high school, right? There's a saying, your mess is your message.
Exactly.
Your mission, if you so choose to accept it, is to share with others what you've learned during those
Ex-
messes. For
exactly.
me, self-identity, I never knew who I was. I had that, unknown. Sure would have been nice if. Well, now that I have this information, I could impart this to my son. I impart this with my daughter, my wife. We're going to be celebrating 35 years this year. My son is 30. My daughter is 25. I left
Amazing.
home at the age of 25. I left home on a fight. They both left home at the age of 25, but under control.
Exactly.
Right? So it's your message, your message. Your mission, if you so choose to accept it, is to share with others on this lifelong journey. And it doesn't stop. I see a lot of people in the military, they're retired, and I'm like, I'm going to be 60 in March. I'm like, I probably still have 16 or 20 years to go in
Like
me.
me.
So,
Yeah. So my life
well,
really started when I was 60, and I finally came at peace. But you see,
hmm,
you have the foundation, JJ. All those things right through your dad and the lessons that he taught you is that you made the decision, so that's what, live with it. And so all of a sudden that became the turnaround in your life to a certain extent. And then from there on in, being exposed to all the things that you learned in the military, and even to the extent that when you exited, it was just the beginning of your next life, really. And obviously, now the book that you wrote, have you got a copy of that we can take a look at, or is it on the market, or?
it's well, I've co-authored 5 books.
Okay,
And the last one is a French book, You've Got Style, Vous avez du style.
okay,
Um, they're in our library. But um, if somebody wants to reach out and want more information, actually, if you go to theretiredspy.com,
okay,
there's complimentary downloads that they can use. What
okay,
saved me when I was in Bosnia, it, we need to build a relationship with people, whether it's
yeah,
professional or personal. But before that,
right,
you need to be able to have a conversation.
right,
Before you have a conversation, you need to be able to ask good questions.
exactly,
So, what saved me, what made me different, is that I had memorized the 10 most effective feel good ice breaking questions.
right.
Those are actually on the website. People can actually
I
go and
I
copy them,
like that.
and they're all there. And I have because I'm very a system oriented individual. So I have a 3 word, 4 words, 5 words. I'm just curious. When you say that to someone, their subconscious mind stays open. Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
what are you curious about?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, you know how. I'm trying to make a connection. Well, you know how it's not clear as to what's happening on the field right now. And then the contact goes like this. Yeah.
Now you have
Would it
contact.
be okay? Would it be okay
Yeah,
if we sat down for coffee and see what we can do to help you in this situation? Would it be okay if?
yeah,
So it's a very good approach, the 3, 4, 5, in order to ask the 10 most effective feel good ice breaking questions. And this way, you're going to have a conversation. And then from there, you'll be able to discern their preferred communication style. Because I use the Four Temperament model, as in the disc model of human behavior. And when I can recognize which quadrant you're coming from, so if you're a little bit more direct, a little bit more inspiring, a little bit more supportive, or a little bit more cautious, then I know that I need to communicate in a firm manner, in a fun manner, in a friendly manner, or in a factual manner
Right.
when connecting with people matters. So it's learning to say the same thing in 4 different ways. So it's been fun doing this and also equipping people. And I even have my own mascot, John.
It's, I love it. I love it. Yeah.
Look at that. He's
Yeah.
got his he's got his earpiece,
I love it.
right? That little jacket. So there's a museum in the States. If you ever go to Washington, D.C.,
Yeah.
go to the Spy Museum. Half a day. It's going to be a half a day experience. And you see all these little. I'm like, oh, look at that! Gotta have one of those. That's my
Yeah.
spy gnome. So because I never wanted to be the retired spy.
No.
I'm an interpersonal skills expert. But people, when I left, kept on introducing me at network events, and oh, who's that bald guy? Oh, that's JJ. He used to be a spy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
JJ.
Yeah.
He's a former operative.
Yeah.
And we label what we don't understand. And
Exactly.
after a while, I'm like, I just accepted the brand. I
Yeah.
found a way to, like, I have a logo. I don't know if this shows well,
I can see
but
it. Yeah. I like it. That shows
so
your the
yeah.
model you just yeah.
And on the other side, I have the model, and it becomes a business card. I just give that to them, and I can speak for 30 minutes with this coin. It's a
Yeah.
challenge coin, and they're all marked, so they're all unique. You get your
Yeah.
own operative number. I was 431. I was the
Yeah.
fourth 431st to graduate spy school. All the double zeros were taken. So that's my number. And then it's like, and again, it's like, oh, what's your number? And it's like, it doesn't mean anything. It's
No.
not what you see in the movies. It's just a career. It's a path. You're an
Yeah.
intelligence officer. You're an intelligence operator. But then people like to say, oh, I know a spy. Well, I'm not a
Yeah.
spy. We don't see ourselves as spies. We're just
Yeah.
professional
Yeah.
expert in a certain field. Happens to be the intelligence branch. So it's all good.
Give us your website once more, JJ, that you said.
The retiredspy.com.
.com.
The
JJ,
retiredspy.com. Yeah.
JJ, it was an amazing podcast. I didn't realize all the similarities that we have. I really enjoyed it, and thank you very much for being a guest on my podcast.
My pleasure. I'm going to be in BC at the end of the year.
So stay in touch with
In
us.
October. Yeah.
You're going
In
to be
Kelowna.
in Vancouver or Kelowna?
Yeah, we're doing training. We're running an event there in Vernon, is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, just north. Yeah, Vernon.
Yeah, close
Kelowna's
to
the airport.
Kelowna. Yeah.
Yeah, flying into Kelowna, and then we're going to be there. A former RCMP officer. I'm working with her over there and equipping and training people. Yeah.
Stay in touch with us and stay in touch with Scott, and then at some point you can come back on our podcast. Or do you have a podcast, or are you just a guest, or what do
Oh,
you do?
no,
Well, stay
I
in
tend to
touch
get
with us.
very. Yeah, I'll stay in touch. I tend to do a lot more interviews
Okay.
because of the amount of training and traveling that I have to do.
Okay. Follow us as well on the Brink with John A. Brink.
Absolutely.
Thanks,
Right.
JJ. Thank you for
John. It was my
the
pleasure.
podcast. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.